one of us has a voice, and we raise our voice in support of Julian Assange and press freedom today. We are here at The Guardian for very good reason. The Guardian has helped in the persecution of Julian Assange in his country, and we've circulated flyers in support of this and encouraged everyone to write to the reader's editor of The Guardian to take down the fake, fabricated story of Paul Manafort visiting Julian Assange inside the embassy. I would like to introduce Maxine Walker, who will say a few words and explain the role of The Guardian, expand on the role of propaganda, and here it is. Maxine Walker, thank you.
Hello, brothers and sisters. I'm glad we have a sunny day to make a nuisance of ourselves outside The Guardian. But before I say anything about The Guardian, I want to say that we should note that when the French people have their press freedom attacked, when they're told the new security law will involve not being allowed to photograph or film the French police as they beat up demonstrators, that would become illegal. They did not write a strongly worded letter to the equivalent of the Lord Chief Justice. They came out in their tens and hundreds of thousands because they take their rights, their democratic rights, seriously. Now, if perhaps wider layers of the population in Britain took their democratic rights seriously, there would be tens and hundreds of thousands on the streets to defend Julian Assange and get him out of Belmarsh, which is what we all want to see. Our leaflet, which I recommend that you take away with you, the spare copies, spells out exactly the degree of blame that attaches to The Guardian editors and journalists in the case of Julian Assange. In that building, they all know the reality of what has happened to Julian Assange. They all know why it has happened. And yet they have chosen, over the course of the last 10 years, to run a concerted campaign of lies, smears, and fabrications. The greatest fabrication being Luke Harding's story that Trump's campaign manager had been to see him in the Ecuadorian embassy. An embassy that was so fully surveilled and spied on that not a termite could visit that embassy without being recorded and filmed. So we know what The Guardian is about. And for me, and I hope for all of you, that The Guardian, you'll agree that The Guardian has the greatest share of blame above all newspapers, above all other media, for the fact that today Julian Assange sits in an unheated, freezing cold cell without his winter clothing, which has been denied to him for weeks now, sits there, tortured and silenced and awaiting extradition. The Guardian bears a large part of the blame for that, because The Guardian has what's called access to the liberal side of British life insofar as it exists. And they have relentlessly turned that wing of the population against Julian Assange. And that really has mattered in building this campaign. They know that the CIA and other intelligence agencies have run a concerted campaign against Julian Assange. And they have mirrored that campaign and used its lies. And the sign that they are culpable in every possible way and that we should be incredibly furious with them and express it here today, the sign is that they have chosen, instead of investigating what's happened to Julian Assange, they have chosen to join the CIA and the other intelligence campaigns against him. Against not just him, but against the very forces of reaction that we all face in this country. This is why we started the pickets here, because we've now seen at the Old Bailey that the Guardian's lies have caught up with them. The Guardian is now being used as part of the prosecution case against Julian Assange. I mean, how low can a newspaper sink than to allow that? So for me, this is not just an issue of press freedom. It is about whether people in Britain and elsewhere can know the truth about what their rulers are doing. Are they going to drown in a sea of disinformation and propaganda, or are they going to be allowed to recognise the truth about the wars and so on that have been conducted by our rulers? When I was preparing the video speech that we've done, which a young supporter has made a wonderful video, really educative video, I found the quote from Karl Rove. Karl Rove was President Bush's right-hand propaganda man in the run-up to the Iraq War. And Karl Rove was being interviewed by a journalist. And Karl Rove accused the journalist of being, "You're part of the reality-based community," he said. The reality-based community. That's not the way we work anymore. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. That's what they're doing, they're creating their own reality. And that really defines the last decades that we've lived through. Particularly, I would date it, the complete departure from reality to the Iraq War, where we were told by people like Bush and the revolting Tony Blair, when we call out the war criminals, remember Tony Blair was number one of those war criminals in persuading the NATO countries to go to war against Iraq, using the pretext that they had biological, chemical and possibly even nuclear weapons that could reach London in 45 minutes. That's what was the headline. That's what Bush and Blair said. And Tony Blair has now been rehabilitated. If you notice, he's on telly telling us what we should do. I mean, he feels he has the right to tell us what to do because he's a billionaire. Because when you go on the side of the US empire, you make a lot of money. The empire's creation of reality is what we call propaganda and disinformation. And it is now one of the key parts of modern warfare. Modern warfare is no longer just, you send your soldiers in, they do this, that and the other, you send your weapons, your planes and your ships. Modern warfare is really about, in a very significant way, how to persuade the populations of the imperialist countries that they should carry on doing what they've been doing for many, many years, which is going into poorer countries and smaller countries and destroying them and not allowing them in any way to develop their own forms of democracy or socialism or any other system which is better than the one we live under. Pilger has said, and I think Pilger's spot on about this, as is Declassified UK, which I recommend you read it all the time, read all their articles. They're the only people who are really exposing what the British state is doing, and we know they're exposing the truth because the Ministry of Defence banned them from their press conferences. That's a badge of honour, being banned by the Ministry of Defence, and they fought that ban. But John Pilger has said, the times we live in are so dangerous and so distorted in public perception that propaganda is no longer an invisible government, it is the government. It rules directly without fear of contradiction, and its principal aim is the conquest of us, our sense of the world, our ability to separate truth from lies. Pilger found that in a 2013 poll, British people thought that only 10,000 people had died in the Iraq War. That's what the majority of British people think. How did they come to think that when we know that millions have died, beginning with that war and throughout the Middle East? it is surprising today, or perhaps it isn't surprising today, that most people in the UK neither know nor ask where their military forces are stationed. There are 7 covert wars being fought by British Special Forces and other military apparatus. Nobody knows about them. Nobody tells you about them. The journalists never get off their settees. They just lie there drinking wine and making things up. And the population gets none of this information. How many people know that between the UK and the US, they have 943 military bases in the world? And there is massive propaganda about the threat posed by Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia. Luke Harding never stops talking about the threat posed by Russia. How many military bases do you think Russia has in the rest of the world? It has 12. And the British and the Americans have 943. Who's the threat? Who's encircling Russia? It's NATO. The absolute opposite of the truth is taking place and being fed to the British population. It's worth noting, as Declassified does, that the British Army is now taking a direct role in British politics. This is an absolute scandal. The British Army, Brigade 77, is being used both during the COVID virus to persuade people of various things, but it was also used against Jeremy Corbyn as part of that campaign. It's used to feed lies to the population. And this is what our tax money is being spent on. We pay for that military, and they are telling us lies. That's what we're paying for lies and disinformation. And the media, let's just talk about the media. The media in what are laughingly called democracies are supposed to hold power to account. They not only fail to do this, they have become willing servants of the propaganda machine. Journalists either toe the line or they get out. They can't work. No wonder the obituaries to Robert Fisk, who was a brilliant journalist about the Middle East, who knew everything about the Middle East, who didn't lie on his sofa when things happened. He went to Duma and he interviewed people, and he found that they didn't know anything at all about this so-called chemical attack. He did that. He cast doubt on that story. So when he died recently, all his obituaries in The Guardian and The Independent and all the rest of them said what a controversial figure he was. He was controversial because he was a journalist, because he got off the city, he went out, he found the facts, and he gave those facts to people. And that is the role of a journalist. I don't want to hear Hadley Freeman's opinion on a journalist in The Guardian, on Assange. I don't want to hear it. Her previous role was fashion correspondent. Her area of expertise is high-heeled shoes. Why does she think we want to know her opinion, her pro-imperialist, slandering, smearing opinion on Julian Assange? I don't want to know their opinions. Give us the facts. Tell us about the military bases. Tell us what it is that WikiLeaks revealed about the war machine. In this world where the media are propagandists came Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. And they hate him. They hate him for his truth-telling, because they don't tell the truth. It's anathema to them. And judging by their actions, I really mean this, the Guardian journalists and editors would rather see Julian Assange die in prison, be imprisoned in an American supermax and die there. I don't think they would mind. So that's the level that they are at. The Guardian is no different to the rest of the press. Following its brief entanglement with WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden, it has abased itself before the British government and British intelligence communities. It has rejoined the D-Notice Committee, which tells them what they can print and what they mustn't print. I'll give you a fine example. Is anybody curious about whatever happened to the Scribbles? You know, the people, the Novichok, anybody know what happened to them? Anybody got the faintest idea? Anybody ever asked? Any journalist curious? No. Any journalist curious enough to get down to Belmarsh and try and get in to see Julian? No. Any journalist curious enough, and I leave out the independent journalists who are the only people who have supported and reported on this struggle. They're not even curious anymore. So we may have thought naively that those in the media would support a free press. The Julian Assange case has shown they will not. They earn their wages the way they earn their wages. We were entirely wrong to suggest to them that they might support a free press. And what will they do when the internet, and there are many, many warnings of this, is censored? That's our platform. That's our only platform. I mean, when I was a young left-winger, we used to use leaflets. We used to go out and use leaflets and newspapers. Now we can reach millions of people with campaigns on the internet, and they're going to censor them. They already are. They're censoring the Palestinians. Because support now for the Palestinians is deemed just simply out of order, anti-Semitic. That's the campaign that they have successfully waged. So they censor their sites, they censor the Assange sites. They do it to everybody who is in opposition to them. They will redouble their efforts to censor us. We have to keep the faith. We are honourable people here today. We have to keep the faith with our reality-based view of the world. Because unlike the rich people in the world, and the powerful people in the world, and their journalistic courtiers, the majority of the world's population is poor. It doesn't know where its next meal's coming from. It doesn't know what kind of insecurity is being created by the imperialists. It only knows that it's under attack. And that is their reality, and that's real reality. And we should sympathise with that reality. We should be on that side. That's the reality we're on, the same side as WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. Propaganda can only work if we don't challenge it. And reality will out in the end. I say today, dump the Guardian, support independent media, the kind of media that's here today, and will print the truth about what's happening, and free Julian Assange.
Free Julian Assange! What do we want for Christmas? There is only one decision! There is only one decision!